Why is some of this shit so hard? Like, yo, today's issue. Every day is fucking something, brother. Today's issue is about healthcare. And so, it has nothing to do with the platform provider. We use JustWorks as a PEO. JustWorks, you should pay us as a sponsor of this podcast. That's a different time and different equation. We use JustWorks to help us with our human resources, our payroll, our benefits. It's been great. Last year, for some reason, I'm sure there is a reason. If somebody knows the reason in like the macroeconomic perspective, please comment it. Like I'll just ask AI and fill in the blanks later. But for some reason, plans have exploded in their costs and we have to eat it. And so the way that the business works, if anybody doesn't really know, if you're providing benefits to your employees, for healthcare at least how it works with this particular platform, we're responsible to pay the full amount of healthcare for all employees that take it. And then if you have a split between your employees and the business, for example, we cover 50% of healthcare and staff pays the other 50%, the business is reimbursed. So shame on me probably for not really understanding how this all worked. And like you and I got this crazy bill. We also got like a huge clutter of transactions that just hit our bank account for adjustments that we made turning into an S Corp coming from an LLC. We're trying to figure out like, is this just like blood money? Is this how much insurance just costs across the open market? Like transparently, I don't care what we talk about. Like we're paying $2,400 a month each for family comprehensive coverage. I have no idea if that's good or bad. We can consult a broker.
That's great.
It's pretty good for Aetna, for high quality insurance.
Well, I was on you remember when we first started this business, I remember going to the exchanges.
Yep.
And for a family plan in New York State, it was $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And that's why we went with the PEO. I still recommend everybody, I go get a business partner.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than you guys can get in on a PEO plan, because right. There needs to be two of you, and you can get in on the health insurance at discounted rate. We do a high deductible plan. I also recommend that. That's another thing that somebody taught us, which is if you look at how costs break down across these insurance plans, the lower deductible plan costs you the same as the high deductible plan overall, except you definitely lose the money by taking the low deductible plan. With the high deductible plan, if you need the health care, you have to pay it, and then you use the money from your business. You have HSA accounts, and you can give yourself that money. If not, the money stays with you. So as an owner, I highly recommend people do the high deductible plans for sure. As an employee, it probably, employees, depending on your situation, if you're healthy, I would do the high deductible plan so you could save more in your HSA and kind of keep that money for old age. I still think it's smart to do a high HSA account and not to do low deductible, particularly unless you have high healthcare costs. Those are different scenarios. But man, because I remember our first few years when we started, we picked a very low deductible plan and we were paying a very large amount. And someone looked at it, an insurance guy came to one of our mentor meetings and he looked at it and goes, "This is crazy." He's like, "You realize if you take the high deductible plan, I think it's a $12,000 out of pocket." He goes,
maximum.
Now this is $12,000 less per person. If you need the 12 grand, you're already paying it. So you should have it in the bank should you need it. But if you don't need it, it stays in the business. And it made a ton of sense. But you and I were super uncomfortable initially with the idea of having high deductibles, but he explained kind of the idea behind there's a cap. It's not like it's so if you have an emergency, it'll exceed your cap. But his point was well taken. You are already paying this money, just doled out month over month, and at the end of the year, you lose it. So like you got to re-up that insurance the next year. At least with the HSA account, you can roll it over to another year where you may need it. And then kind of the dirty little secret of healthcare is you have a bill, you have insurance, you give your insurance card, you make sure that hits the insurance. Any overage you do not pay at the hospital. And this was his other advice. He goes, you do not pay at the hospital. In fact, don't pay it at all. And you can negotiate down later with the hospital, with the collections agency. This will not, in our state, in New York State, I don't want to give the wrong advice. In New York State, it does not hit your credit. So you can negotiate these bills down safely to something you can afford. Because as a business owner, because I got hit with this when my daughter went to the hospital, you get hit with a big bill like that, And like I was struggling to pay, and they were like, no, 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 let that go to collections. You negotiate later, and you still get full credit for the deductible.
Right.
So you hit your deductible max. All of your doctor's payments are free and clear for the rest of the year. And you negotiate that with the hospital later. That does not come back to the insurance company, at least in New York State.
So,
And it was very well worth it. I hate what does it say? Don't hate the player, hate the game. Freaking hate this game. Health insurance is really messed up in the United States. It's not, none of this is right, and whoever's fault, whatever the fault is, that's not what I'm here to discuss. I have a very strong philosophy on this. Like, you just have to play the cards you're dealt, and these are the cards you're dealt, and I'm telling you, this is the way you make that play.
And so the reason why I bring this up today and why this is kind of the way that we kick off stand-up is because when these types of things happen, call them like squirrels. Like squirrel.
Right.
It's just a huge distraction on the day. Like how many, I have spent 3 to 4 hours today wrestling with this, trying to piece together where the leaky bucket is. And so this is just one of those things. Like, transparently, we delayed this recording today because I was on the phone with our provider. And like, this is one of those things, like on the day-to-day of running a business, you have things that come along that just steal your peace, steal your attention, steal your money. And so this is one of those things that stole all three from me today. So how do you not talk about it? If we're building transparently and in public, this is the reality of running a business and providing benefits to yourselves and to your staff. And so I thought that this was relatively timely to bring up because our experience is not unique. There are plenty of businesses today that woke up halfway through the month, payroll happens tomorrow, and they're just like reconciling their cash flow and they're like, what the heck is going on? Like, it's the first month where you're seeing like major premium increases coming out of your new plan selections from open enrollment last year. And so dust is settling and you're figuring out like, holy smokes, it went up a lot. And so it's a little bit stressful. And so as you and I try to figure out ways of creating sustainable margin and like focusing on being a profitable business, like we don't just have someone else's money that we can throw at this problem. When you get healthcare at a startup and you're venture backed, it's largely somebody else's money that's covering all of these expenses.
100% cover. Right. You get 100%
100% coverage. You don't even realize how this calculation works. You and I took it for granted working for venture-backed businesses in the past or publicly traded companies in the past or just very successful companies. You take it for granted as an employee. You don't even know what the calculation behind this is. Not that I'm looking for any sympathy, but as somebody who was once an employee and is now an owner, to have to reconcile the cash requirement just to provide benefits, it almost makes me feel that I'd rather cut the cash to the ailment for my staff than provide them continuous health insurance. I'd rather pay for the bill when the thing happens than continuously pay for your benefit. Maybe that's crazy talk, but that's just the stress.
It's not. I worked for a company that did this. So it's really interesting. And I did not understand it at the time. I used to just think the benefit was cool. They called it something called Bitcoin. And what it was it was $2,000 that every employee got for the year that they could use on something health related. So if you had a gym membership, you could use it. All of your deductibles, glasses out of pocket. So any out of pocket, but they offered higher deductible plans, and then they offered this $2,000 kind of stipend for all of the overages as well as some other nice things. You couldn't use it for like ski equipment, like you couldn't do it for things like that. But I think that was exactly right. They were like, hey, we're going to pick lower cost plans. We'd rather give you the money if and when you need it than be like guaranteed this money, and basically gets thrown out the window because let's be real, my costs for employees just went up. Nobody feels like they got a raise, but they all got a raise.
Right.
So it's like this is the reality of being a business owner. If you're an employee watching this, you're probably like, fuck you, man. Like that's not a raise. No, but in very real sense, I have less money to give people raises with this year. And how do I explain that to people? Like this thing you barely ever use, because that's the reality of health insurance. It's this thing that just kind of sits there. And I can't do anything about it. And how much more money would doctors have if I was paying them cash? I can't help but think about that. If I wasn't punting bills and paying things, if I could afford to pay things on time, maybe you wouldn't need all these overages, because how many people are not paying the bills at all? And at the end of the 3 years, they get thrown out. So you think about the system as a whole, and you're right. As a business owner, you got to, someone once told me this, that when you own a business, if the light goes out, you got to get on the ladder and change the light bulb. If you just want a code that's not for you.
So here's something else that like you just don't even really think about unless it becomes your problem. Every company has an owner that is responsible for things that only the owner can do, like access a bank account. Like nobody else could call Chase Bank for us to contest a charge. Like they must speak to the owner of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what scale you are, like if you're Elon Musk, you still have to call your banker directly. Nobody can call you as a proxy for that. You might be able to like be on the call and then give somebody permission, like, hey, you can speak to this person. I authorized them. But one of the other things that happened to us is we were hit with some retroactive, very, very minimal, but highly duplicative, and lots of them, like more than 20 duplicative charges yesterday. And so I have no explanation of where those came from. So I had to call Chase this morning to try and get an explanation of what these charges are. And they're not fraudulent. They're adjustments from our PEO who never issued us an invoice. It's just a blind charge to balance out the change from going from an LLC to an S Corp. So
the year before,
retroactively recuperating as they're filing and trying to close out their year, they realize, oh, we had a filing status change. They have administrative fees that are associated to that. We're just going to blindly tap the business for 20-something plus charges at $100 plus per charge. And so I'm trying to stitch together this entire equation. I have no invoice history. I have no explanation of what's going on here. At the end of the day, that is the explanation, is that since we changed from an LLC to an S Corp, there's now an administrative adjustment that takes place with your PEO provider. And so I just wasn't expecting all of that. But dude, I'm the only person that could have called the bank to have that conversation. It's no matter how big you get, no matter where your responsibilities take you, there are still certain things that only the owner is going to be able to do.
Well, I would have expected a call or, like you said, a call or email about why that was happening, and there was none. And that was really the problem. And then, of course, I talk about the administrative, is there really, like I argue that today, I go, is there really an administrative charge?
What's the
last 7 months were gone. You weren't doing any additional administration last year. Is this just a money grab? Where is that? Is that really money that needs to go up? But these are, again, all questions you as the owner have to be all over all the time, because cash is your blood. Like, the blood that runs a business is cash. And as Mr. Wonderful says, if you don't respect every dollar, like if you just let it slide like it's only $100, money leaves you. You need to respect every single dollar on the bottom line. Especially, I mean, if you're bootstrapped, for sure. I mean, I would argue even if you're venture backed, you should be doing that. I just think it's hard to imagine when you get $1 million just like dumped in your bank account and all you're doing is being cash flow negative. I could see it being very easy. You could very easily kind of forget all that stuff, but that's also like the health benefits. Why did we choose 50-50 for employees? Because I felt like I wanted the employee to have some skin in the game when there were health insurance increases. Like when we sat down and decided, and this actually comes, my uncle was a dentist, and he had said this, that in his practice, when it came to health insurance, he split portions of it with the employees because he wanted everybody to sit around and say, hey, this is the health insurance, and it wasn't just like pick the best plan because the employer's paying for it. It's like, hey, we share in that burden. And so we have to decide together how much, what makes sense for the business as a whole. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's wrong. I think it's a lot easier to cover 100% when you just raised $100 million and you just don't care. But when you think about, when I think about what happened in the industry over the last couple of years, lots of layoffs. We've talked about this in the past. I feel like there's been a big correction in salary, and people listening, tell me how you feel if you're a bootstrapped agency. But man, one of the most humbling things for me was how freaking hard it is to pay somebody 150 grand a year plus benefits. Holy crap, that's hard. How to pay yourself a wage like that is hard. Like, we are still not at what I was making, like, you know what I mean, as a staff or a principal engineer at one of these bigger companies. And you think about that and you're like, man, they were covering that, and they were covering the health insurance 100%, and I had matching 401k. And so I'm like looking at the total package at some of these places and I go, wow, $3, $4, $500,000 at some of these places per employee. My God, it's just so hard to get to that level of income bootstrapped. I think I have a new perspective. I always kind of felt like the bootstrap was a certain way. I can see why the VC path is so appealing, especially if you have a family, man. It would be pretty nice to have like marketing budget and things like that covered. And you're like, look, people are taking this ride with me and they're paying me to stay in this ride. And I don't have to just feed off of the profits. However, this has forced us to be very smart business owners. But, the difficulty, you feel it.
You absolutely do feel it. Dude, I think we can keep this one a little bit short. Just a rant of the day of some of the bullshit you got to go through to just keep the doors open, keep people employed, and keep yourselves healthy.
Yeah, I got to go check our software subscriptions. You reminded me. I'm like, let me make sure there's no stragglers in GitHub. I'm not paying some extra subscription fees here and there, right? I got to do this stuff at least once every couple of months. I have to run through the credit card statement and check it all.
Absolutely. You just have to stay hyper vigilant when it comes to your own cash, especially if you're bootstrapped, especially if you're profitable. Like, you want to protect your margin. So anything that is going to steal a piece of your margin, whether it's like natural rate increases, whether it's blind increases, it could be rogue money to something, it could be fraudulent charges. You got to be on top of every dollar. And so because we're on top of every dollar, we uncovered a bit of a rabbit hole for today. It's behind us now. And that's just how it goes. Tomorrow we'll bring in something else.
Well, I would be remiss if we didn't at least mention our tool, which is fast approaching the march to launch. It is actually live, but I think that I would say it's not quite ready yet for the re-release, which is fin forecasting. We're targeting February 1st. So if you are watching this saying, man, I wish there was a tool that helped me keep track of expenses against my contractor and employee revenue and my project revenue to make sure they were all profitable and how to bring all that together, we have built this because of this problem. You happened to catch it today on the spreadsheet because the tool was not looking right. We were looking at the tool and we go, wait a minute, there should be way more money in the bank right now. And so this is the first time that I was like, wow, the tool actually caught this. And we knew that there was a problem. So now we're integrating a little bit more. We're like, okay, well, let's add some cash flow things because we could help track some of this down. So this tool is always improving. And so if you've watched this and you're like, man, I could use some help with that, the tool is coming.
It's coming. It's coming. Dude, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Peace.